The locals say the hotel drives people to kill themselves, but the dead never leave. They wandered the hallways, whispering to the living, begging for company in their endless silence. And once you check in, they follow you everywhere, waiting for the moment you're alone. Watch this video to the end, subscribe, and like to stay safe from what follows next. I never believed stories like that. I was a freelance documentarian, obsessed with finding real proof of the supernatural. Most places claimed to be haunted, but every time I showed up, all I found were squeaky pipes, moldy walls, and owners desperate for attention. But when I heard about the Redwood Valley suicide hotel, a place with 47 deaths in 20 years, almost all self-inflicted, I knew I had to investigate. The hotel sat in the middle of a forested cliffside in Northern California, isolated from the main road by nearly 2 miles of winding pavement. It was built in the 1920s and abandoned in the 90s, but still half-standing. The photos online showed broken windows, collapsed beams, and a lobby coated in dust. Yet people kept sneaking in. Nearly all who died there left no explanations. The only trace in many cases were fingernail scratches on the walls, as if they tried to escape something no one else could see. I arrived just before dusk. The air felt unnaturally cold for early fall, the kind of cold that presses against your skin even through layers of clothes. The building loomed like a corpse hollow, sagging and drained of all warmth. My flashlight beam cut through dust swirling in the air like ash. The front doors were swollen with moisture, and when I pushed, one hinge snapped off, and the door fell inward with a groan that echoed down the long corridor ahead. The sound bounced in ways that made my stomach twist. Something about the hall felt rung too narrow, too dark, too still. I started filming immediately. Day 1, Redwood Suicide Hotel Investigation. I whispered into the mic. Full walkthrough. No signs of life. No squatters. Just silence. But as I took my first step inside, something brushed past my shoulder, not air, not cloth, but something colder than ice, like a hand made of smoke. You spoon around, no one was there. I told myself it was nerves. The lobby looked like a mausoleum. The chandelier hung crooked, crystals missing. The spiderweb spread across its arms. A decayed bell sat on the reception desk. I pressed it out of habit. The bell didn't ring. Instead, something answered with a whisper, a woman's whisper. I froze. It came from behind the desk, a soft voice that sounded like it had been scraped through broken glass. I stepped closer. My light caught movement. I aimed it downward, expecting an animal, but fingers long, gray, trembling fingers scurled slowly over the edge of the desk, not reaching out, pulling themselves up. That was the moment I realized the stories weren't exaggerations. They weren't even close. My throat tightened. I'm not going to any room, I whispered, even though my voice barely held together. The tall specter didn't react to my resistance. He simply lowered his hand and began walking toward me with that same unnatural tilt in his neck, each step slower than the last as if savoring the distance closing between us. Primera vez que dawai my light, trembling over the peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards. Then something caught my attention. Room 213. The numbers were carved unnaturally deep into the wood, as though etched by fingernails instead of tools. The door was cracked open, a thin line of darkness leaking from it like smoke. As I moved backward, the air behind me thickened, pressing on my spine. It felt like someone was standing inches from me, breathing against my neck. I held my breath and forced myself to look. A woman hung upside down from the ceiling as if gravity didn't apply to her. Her hair dangled toward the floor, brushing my shoulder. Her eyes were wide open, lids torn, pupils white and milky. She had rope burns around her neck-deep purple grooves. Her voice slid into my ear like a wet whisper. He'll make you jump like he made us. I stumbled away from her, crashing into the opposite wall. My camera slipped from my grip, clattering across the hallway, but miraculously continuing to record. The upside-down woman rotated her head like an owl and stared at me, her lips twitching into a smile that stretched far too wide. Her teeth were blackened, broken, some missing entirely. The tall man in the suit stopped walking. He raised his hand again, but this time he wasn't pointing. He was gesturing, inviting, commanding. Room 213's door creaked wider by itself. I felt something inside my mind tighten, like invisible fingers gripping the base of my skull. A wave of despair washed over me heavy, suffocating. It wasn't sadness with meaning. It was emptiness made into a weapon. I felt the sudden, overwhelming urge to walk into that room. To let everything go, to stop resisting the calling that echoed in my mind. Jump, jump. The word repeated like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. No, I whispered through clenched teeth. You're not getting me. I forced my legs to move, grabbing my camera and pushing down the hallway. But the whole corridor had changed again. Every door now had the numbers 213 scratched into them, hundreds of identical doors as far as I could see, each one leaking that same dark mist, each one whispering in the voices of people long dead. The upside-down woman began crawling across the ceiling at an alarming speed, her limbs bending backward like spider legs, elbows and knees cracking loudly. The tall man's footsteps grew heavier, echoing like thunder inside the corridor's wooden frame. I sprinted. The whispering grew louder, dozens of voices, hundreds, men, women. Men, women, children all. Begging, pleading, sobbing, commanding me to end myself. The cold air burned against my lungs as I ran, and when I reached the corner of the hallway, the building twisted again. I found the staircase. I didn't hesitate. I ran down it 2 steps at a time, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. But the ghosts didn't stop. They followed. They wanted me. They wanted me in room 213. The fingers tightened against the wood, and a thin hand rose into view. The skin looked waterlogged, tinted blue, like it had been submerged for days. My breath locked in my throat as the hand lifted higher. Then a forehead appeared, slick with rotting hair plastered across it. When the face finally pulled itself into the open, I staggered backward so fast I nearly dropped the camera. Her eyes were the worst part wide, black pits with no light inside them. No reflection, just depth, endless and swallowing. The flesh around her mouth hung like it had been torn, leaving her jaw slightly unhinged. She stared at me with a desperate, pleading expression, then opened her mouth wider, a crackling sound tearing through the air as if her bones were grinding. No. More. She whispered. I bolted. I didn't care about the footage, the investigation, or my stupid obsession with proof. I sprinted down the hallway, boots skidding over broken tiles. But the hall seemed longer than before. The darkness pressed in like fog made of ink. And then I heard footsteps behind Minot, running but dragging, slow and scraping. I forced myself to keep moving. I reached a staircase, climbed 2 steps at a time until I reached the 2nd floor landing. The temperature dropped sharply, frosting the edge of my camera lens. I wiped it with my sleeve, but the cold only deepened. The hallway upstairs was lined with room doors, all half open, swaying slightly even though there was no wind. The air smelled like mildew and old perfume, as if the scent had seeped into the wallpaper and never evaporated. My flashlight flickered. Once, twice, then every door slammed shut at the same time. The boom shook the hallway. I backed up, completely disoriented. My first instinct was to leave, run back down and escape through the forest. But when I turned around, the staircase was gone. I stared at empty wall, where an opening should have been. No, 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 I muttered, running my hands across the cold surface. It wasn't possible. The hotel was changing. Something whispered behind me. A man's voice, this time deep, tired, mournful. You should not have come. I spun around with my flashlight. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor. Tall, male, wearing what looked like an old hotel uniform from the 1950s. Black jacket, brass buttons, torn name tag dangling from the front. His head was tilted too far to one side, neck bent, as if it had broken and never healed. He blinked slowly. The lights in the hall flickered with each movement of his eyes, like his presence drained electricity from the air. When he stepped forward, the bulbs overhead popped one by one, shattering in bursts of tiny glass that rained down around him but never touched him. I whispered, "What do you want?" He raised his hand and pointed at me with a trembling finger. "You," he said. "Room 213 is waiting." The staircase trembled under my feet as I descended, each step groaning like it was about to collapse. Something cold clutched at my ankles, yanking me hard enough that I almost fell forward. I kicked wildly and tore myself free, stumbling into the first-floor hallway. The lights overhead flickered in rapid bursts, strobing shadows across the walls. Shadows that didn't match my movements. They moved on their own. Crawling, growing, reaching. I ran past the lobby, desperate for the exit, but the front doors I'd entered through were no longer attached to the hinges. Instead, two massive wooden slabs blocked the entrance, like the hotel itself had sealed me in. I slammed my shoulder against them again and again until my muscles shook. But they didn't they. Mabani, not even dust shifted. Behind me, footsteps multiplied, dragging, staggering, hundreds of them. I turned slowly. They filled the lobby, every ghost that had ever died in the suicide hotel, standing shoulder to shoulder in a silent, suffocating mass. Some were hanging by invisible nooses, swaying gently as if moved by wind that wasn't there. Others had slit wrists, dried blood running down their fingers. Some had eyes missing. Some had jaws hanging by threads of muscle. And others had faces so ruined I couldn't tattle. If Teddy ever been human. And at the front of the crowd stood the tall man with the broken neck. He lifted his hand again and pointed at me with that same stiff, trembling finger. "You belong to us now," he whispered. "Room 213 has chosen." I backed up until my spine hit the blocked exit. My flashlight flickered, then died completely, leaving only the dim, rotting chandeliers overhead. The ghosts moved closer, not fast, but with the steady certainty of a tide rolling in. Their mouths opened one by one, releasing a chorus of whispers that layered over each other until they became a suffocating, unified command. "Jump! Jump! Jump! Jump!" I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. The voices weren't around me anymore. They were inside me, clawing at my thoughts, dragging their fingers across every memory I had. I felt the hotel pushing into my mind, infecting it with despair so immense it blotted out everything else. It was like drowning in grief that wasn't mine. I dropped to my knees. The tall man stepped closer, his broken neck snapping slightly with each movement. When he crouched in front of me, his face only inches from mine, I finally saw the truth. His eyes weren't black, they were hollow, completely empty. Inside those sockets were dozens of tiny, pale faces, screaming silently, trapped behind the veil of whatever he had become. He leaned forward. "Let us in," he whispered. A hand touched my shoulder. I recoiled, but when I looked up, a young woman stood beside me, pale skin, long black hair stuck to her cheeks, a rope mark circling her throat. She wasn't like the others. Her eyes were full of fear, not hunger. "Run!" she mouthed. And then she screamed. The scream wasn't human. It pierced the air like a blade of pure sound. The other ghosts recoiled, flickering like candle flames in a storm. The tall man staggered backward, clutching his ears with frozen hands. The chandelier of him shattered, laying glass across the floor. "Go," she shrieked. "Before he takes your mind." The walls shook. The floor split. The hotel itself roared in anger as if alive. I didn't look back. I hurled myself toward the side hallway, where a window had cracked open from the vibrations. Glass laced my arms as I dove through it, rolling across the dirt outside. The cold night air hit me like a rebirth. Behind me, the hotel screamed a deep, furious howl that echoed through the forest. I ran until my lungs felt like they would tear. When I finally reached my car, shaking and covered in blood, I looked back one last time. Every window of the suicide hotel glowed with pale faces pressed against the glass. Watching. Waiting. Hungry. And in the center window of the second floor, room 213's window, the tall man stood with his broken neck leaning against the glass, his empty eyes locked onto me. Then every light went out at once. I drove away without looking back again, but sometimes, late at night when I'm alone and my mind starts to wander, I hear the whisper return. Soft, patient, inevitable. Jump, jump, jump. And every time I check the shadows, terrified that one day I will hear room 213 whisper back.